just want to touch a few things. He said, and God blessed them. God wanted to open the burden in his heart and the very factor that necessitated the creation of man. Because before God began to create, there were many things God represented before he became a creator. Everything we know about God are the things that he engrafted into the syllables of his being as creator. But in God, when there was no time, when all the references that were was God, there were many things God represented. It's a mistake to think that God is creator and begin to interact with him purely as creator. He is bigger than creator. Because before creation was, he was. He is older than creation. Creation is just one expression of the multifaceted realities that he represents. Before he ever began creation, he was. But you see, now that he has created, and he has created men, it was necessary for him to open the understanding of men to know why it was necessary to create them. Because before he created men, he had created other spirits. There were many communities and many civilizations going on in the spirit before God decided to create man. In fact, if you study Genesis chapter 1 from verse 26, it said, God said, let us make man. That was the first community that was. Because the first community that ever was existed in God. It was a community of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And where they dwelt was in God. Because you see, it is only creation that requires external environment. God does not need an environment. God is God's environment. God lives in God. Because there was nothing before God. You know, when Paul was speaking, he said that God dwells in light, unapproachable, in 1 Timothy 6:16. And John was teaching in John chapter 1 verse 5, and he said, God is light. He said, this is the message that we have received from him, that he is light, and in him is no darkness. So God is light, and God dwells in light. So what it means is that God lived in God. So the first community that ever existed was the community of the Godhead. And that community was governed by three perfect realities: the will of the Father, the wisdom of the Father, and the power of the Father. This is why the first revelation of God in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 was Almighty, Elohim. Because you can't define God apart from power. And you can also not walk in the realm of God without aligning to his will. And when you function by God's power and in God's will, then you are operating in God's wisdom. So God's civilization was governed by his will, his power, and his wisdom. And this God existed in himself, a community of three beings that at the same time is one. And so before anything was, they related with themselves as a perfect community, existing in perfect harmony. But a point came where the love of God began to propel God to create an environment outside of himself. And so God went on an adventure of creation. That was when God became a creator. But when the Father, the Son, and the Spirit were relating together before creation ever was, God was. And there are many things God represents that we don't know of. But when he decided to start creating, he began to create different ecosystems regulated by different realities. And so before he came to man, there was the angelic order. That was the first external environment he created. It was actually a spirit realm. Because he said in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So he created the spirit realm. There was a realm that was unseen before he decided to create the seen realm. Now, this unseen realm also has many civilizations in it because of how vast God is. You have elders.